Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for coming here tonight. I'm going to talk about the Rite of Spring, which is, of course, probably the most famous Diaghilev product. But it's become famous as a piece of music for concert performance, primarily. I know that so many times when I play it to my students for the first time with the ballet, with the reconstruction of original choreography, they're absolutely astonished. Yeah, they can never forget that moment again, because that is the moment when they understand this is what the Rite of Spring is about. So you might have seen it before, so it's not going to be a discovery for some of you, because of course there was a centenary of this piece, a centenary of the premiere in 1913, and there were quite a lot of productions. But nevertheless, what I was going to try to do today is to put this piece of music back into multimedia context, back into the context of the collaboration between various people within the Diaghilev enterprise, and also connected to some ballets that came before and some ballets that came after. So the Rite of Spring, a failure and a triumph. We're going to start with Petrushka. So this is the previous ballet by Stravinsky. It was premiered in 1911, and it's a very different story. It's again a Russian ballet, but different from the Firebird because it's not trying to make an accent on the exoticism. But it's a romantic story about a character who is a puppet who comes to life. And of course, with all that comes life's suffering. So he falls in love, unrequitedly, for the ballerina, tries to kill his rival, is himself killed, but his spirit lives. Yes, so it's a very romantic story, but nevertheless, there are very interesting aspects of modernist aesthetics coming in through this ballet. And there are a few points that I wanted to note. So these are the collaborators, scenario by Benoit and Stravinsky, who were basically based this scenario on various memories from their childhood. It's St. Petersburg, it's the 1880s, it's a fair, it's an urban fair. They were trying to remember the details of various entertainments that they had at such fairs. Choreography was by Michel Fokine, so the same choreographer as for the Firebird, designed by Benoit, and Petrushka was danced by this wonderful dancer, Václav Nijinsky, who was the great star of Diaghilev ballet during all those years. He was also Diaghilev's lover, which is also significant for this story. So you can see that the posture, the pose of Petrushka is unusual. It's slightly awkward. You can't see his fingers, you can see his mittens. He's a puppet, he moves like a puppet. And we have just a few seconds, apparently, of the video. That's all you can have of the original. But I wanted to show you one of the reconstructions, because this ballet has been preserved in the repertoire. There's a continuous line. It never fell out of the repertoire because it's so beloved by the audiences. And this is a Mariinsky production which was made as a film, and I think it gives you a very interesting point of view on that ballet. So where it starts, you will see that the music represents the crowd just milling around. There's no melody to speak of. There are all sorts of things popping up from that texture and then disappearing again. It's a little bit like a general plan of the film, and then suddenly you zoom in on something. So you can hear all kinds of melodies popping up, but they are actually based on traders' cries, street traders' cries that were notated at that point. So Stravinsky sort of used them as an inspiration. But this whole idea of lots of things sounding simultaneously creating this glorious polyphony, the glorious soundscape of the city. which you can hear when you come out of here to the streets of London. You will hear something like that. Yeah, in distinct and yet various particular things attracting your attentions. So this is what we'll hear at the start. Cacophony, yeah, there are even different meters going on at the same time. So that's something new that he discovered here. Now, another thing that I wanted to show you is what Fokine does with the choreography. And what he does is visualizing the music through movement in a very precise, very particular way. And they're doing this in this production very well. You will see immediately what I am talking about. So could you see that all the little notes were danced out by the feet precisely, in time to the music. And also you probably noticed that, this is a great ballet trick used in many ballets when something comes to life, something inanimate comes to life. So he comes to life, but he still has this very awkward pose, which becomes his choreographic signature. And this is very important, because it's not actually a graceful pose. It's something very expressive, but it's not beautiful. It's awkward and possibly even ugly. And there's something else that I wanted to tell you now about how the music is developed. And the music very often quotes particular folk songs. But these folk songs, I will show you, you will recognize the tune, how it's used in Stravinsky, but you will also notice how it's distorted. So every time Stravinsky would use a motif, he would add a note or subtract a note or do too many repetitions, until you basically have the same thing, stamping all over again. And this is again the beginning of him discovering what he could do with rhythm in his music, which will go on into the Rite of Spring. But first of all, so this is a folk song, again a kind of street urban folk song called Down the Peterskaya Street, sung by Fyodor Shalyapin, whom you've heard about in this course, who was very much a friend of the Diaghilev enterprise. So now, let's hear it. The melodies disappeared, only rhythm. then it gets even more raucous. So out of the folk material, he invents something new. And this is another new thing that happens here. So I'm just going to summarize this point. So we have the ungraceful dancing body, the visualization of the music through movement, these grotesque deformations of folk tunes, and something new. Russian character is now used without nationalist glorification. Actually, this is why the Russians, it was very difficult for them to come to terms with this ballet, because there was not, he was making fun of the tunes. And not everyone liked that. The son of Rimsky-Korsakov absolutely hated it, and this was the start of the rift with the family of Rimsky-Korsakov. Thankfully, Rimsky-Korsakov was dead already, who was, of course, Stravinsky's teacher. So, Russian character is not a vehicle for nationalist glorification, but for something else. It actually becomes the material to do something modernist, something new, something formally, structurally advanced, sort of progressive, as they thought of it at those times. So this was our prelude, and now we're going to talk about the Rite of Spring, which comes only 2 years later. And no matter how much preparation, how many threads we can draw between Petrushka and the Rite of Spring, it's a shock. It's a completely unpredictable thing what Stravinsky does here. And also the same shock happens in choreography. So it's a moment of great discovery. And you have to remember that was the time when we had Picasso around, when we have lots of these amazing, crazy discoveries in the visual arts as well. And in music, Stravinsky's rival Schoenberg was also discovering atonality, and actually just before, the year before, Diaghilev and Stravinsky visited Schoenberg, and Schoenberg played them some of the music, and Diaghilev thought it was a bit old-fashioned. So Diaghilev was clearly going for something that would be absolutely cutting edge, something that had never been heard before, and supported this project, which the project was, of course, crazy. Now, the scenario was actually a collaboration between Nikolai Roerich, who is also a designer for this ballet, and Stravinsky. You don't hear very much about Roerich because he was a very modest man. He was a kind of spiritual man. He spent most of his life in India in the end. And it wasn't arguing about copyrights, like everyone else did. So, but Stravinsky, of course, wanted to claim it all for himself, and this is his famous quote. Its embryo was a theme that came to me while I was finishing The Firebird. Since this theme and what followed from it were conceived with a stark and brutal character, I chose as a pretext, to develop them as an evocation of prehistoric Russia. So he says it starts with the music and not from the scenario. It becomes about prehistoric Russia because that's how he felt the music should sound. But note well that the idea came from the music and not the music from the idea. I have written an architectural work, not an anecdotal one. That's a very important statement for him. But as you can see, Roerich was toiling on the same lines. This is his painting The Idols from 1910, which could be already the Rite of Spring. You can see the scary idols and all these skulls, and something horrible must have happened here. And there are no people visible, but it's a set for something quite terrifying. And of course, there were lots of other artists that explored similar topics of primitivism, yeah, primitive cultures, ritual, and Gauguin was a great influence. Nijinsky actually mentions him. This, for example, is the Fire Dance from 1891, and there is also a wonderful quote from Gauguin when he was criticized for his very bright colors. He had the kind of monotonous colors. This is what he wrote in a letter to his critic. Are not these repetitions of tones, and he talks about colors, these monotonous color harmonies in the musical sense, analogous to oriental chants sung in a shrill voice to the accompaniment of pulsating notes which intensify them by contrast. Think also of the musical role color will henceforth play in modern painting. Color, which is vibration, just as music is able to attain what is most universal, yet at the same time most elusive in nature, its inner force. Here near my cabin, in complete silence, amid the intoxicating perfumes of nature, I dream of violent harmonies, a delight enhanced by I know what sacred horror I divine in the infinite. Yes, as if he's talking about the Rite of Spring already. He's dreaming of violent harmonies. He talks about painting, but in a musical sense. Yeah, so this liberation of color it goes absolutely in parallel with what we call emancipation of dissonance. Yeah, so Stravinsky is part of this. And of course there was also Picasso as well, influenced by various other tribal art, yeah, from Africa. And he was part of this set as well. There is another connection, interesting connection with the Rite of Spring, which is with Rimsky-Korsakov's opera, The Snow Maiden. Yeah, so very conventional opera, very romantic, very beautiful, from 1882. But suddenly, in the libretto, at the very end, when the Snow Maiden melts, and she has to melt because otherwise the spring will never come. Yeah, so she's kind of a hostage to this calendar circle of seasons. Then the Tsar of this kingdom says these words: "The Snow Maiden's sad end cannot trouble us, for her miraculous death, frost's interference has ceased." Yeah, so it was written as a very romantic story, and suddenly this distance. Yeah, our hearts been warmed up. We were crying for her, and suddenly we were told not to cry for her. Yeah, and she becomes just a sort of little cog in this whole mechanism of rotating seasons. Yeah, and this is. I mean, obviously Stravinsky knew that. Actually, his father sang Father Frost in this opera. Yeah, and I also want you to see, to notice the costume here. It is the costume of Lel, the god of love, from the Snow Maiden. And you will see in a moment costumes that are very similar to that in the Rite of Spring. Yeah, so all kinds of things went into it. But the point is that the scenario is really doesn't have any narrative. Not very much happens here. You will see that these are all the titles of the two parts, all the numbers, and only really these things that I put in brackets is where something happens. Everything else is just ritual games. Yeah, so they're actual dances. So it's a ballet more about dancing than about any story, because the story can be expressed in one sentence. Yeah, that sacrificial virgin is chosen, and she's dancing herself to death because she has to. Because again, the spring is not going to come. And now the moment, if you haven't seen this, yeah, this is the moment of a great discovery one. This is the Augurs of Spring, a very famous, violent and loud and offensive, musically offensive moment in Stravinsky that works so well with Nijinsky's choreography. playing you this little bit of wonderful, I keep wanting to call it a documentary. It's obviously not a documentary, yeah, but this very document-based recreation of what happened on that fateful night of 29th of May 1913. Yeah, so this great moment of astonishing. We've never heard anything like that, which is offensively loud, and you've never seen anything like that. So what can we say about the score? Again, you know, a few points. Actually, to say that this score, it's not complex in a traditional sense. Yeah, actually, a lot of sophistication is sort of stripped away. The traditional counterpoint, traditional harmony, modulation, all that is taken away. Yeah, as Stravinsky himself said, I think they've made it with an axe. Yeah, so. And it's really a celebration in these offensively loud and violent dissonances. Rhythms that you've heard, yeah, are repetitive but unpredictable. There are these unpredictable shocks, accents, yeah, so they are not regular. This very basic material, the tunes, often have 3 or 4 notes, no more. Yeah, they're based on, inspired on by folk sources, by the very, very old, ancient ritual songs. And some of them Stravinsky found in a particular collection of folk song, which actually was not Russian but Lithuanian, yeah, because they had this, this sort of apparently pagan ancient songs surviving into the present. And then, yeah, he combines very densely these primitive elements in the new kind of complexity. And obviously, I'm not going to show you very much of the score. Yeah, the score is huge. You won't be able to see anything. I don't want to put you off. But I wanted to show you something else. But before I do that, I'll just give you a quote from Kandinsky, who was, of course, an artist. Yeah, and this is his watercolor, the first abstract color watercolor from 1910. Just as in music or in painting, there exists no ugly sounds and no external dissonance. Every sound or concordance of sounds is beautiful, providing that it arises from some inner necessity. Yeah, so you can see how they were all on the same lines. It was kind of aesthetic parallelism of different arts at that time. But this is what I wanted. This is not everyone might like this, but I wanted to show you. This is a great way to visualize music without the score and to see how it's constructed. So somebody has done this for us, and I'm going to play this. So you can see the different patterns are picked out in different colors. And you will see how the same color means that the pattern is repeated. You will be able to separate with your ear from everything else. And you will see other things added to it. Yeah, so this is how Stravinsky's score is constructed. Very simple orange pattern, yeah? See how he does it. You can try it at home, yeah? So now this new complexity that arises from this is challenging, of course, for performers. It was challenging for the orchestra. They had lots of rehearsals. It was challenging for the conductor. Now look what the conductor is going to see. Yeah, if you understand a bit about meter, yeah, so 2/4, 3/16, 2/16, 3/16, 2/8, yeah, every bar is a different meter, yeah, so how are you going to conduct this, yeah, this is how. So it's easy, you see. Let us talk about the design now. Yeah, so designed by Roerich. So you have a minimalist set in very bright colors. He was very interested in authenticity. He actually collected folk ornaments. Yeah, so you have a little bit of authenticity coming through folk songs, but then it's all distorted. Yeah, and the same thing happens here. He finds these authentic ornaments and stylizes them into something else. Costumes now cover the body. Yeah, which was it's a great offense to ballet to cover the body of the dancer, right? Because ballet had always been about seeing the body. That was almost the only place you could see it, yeah, especially female body. And now you can't. Face is heavily painted, so there is no expression. And it's interesting that Nijinsky actually designed the choreographer after having seen the costumes. Yeah, so again, you see at first the music comes, then the design, the choreography, they're all inspired by each other. And you can see that again, you remember Lel's costume from the Snow Maiden. It's based on the traditional Russian costume and stylized. And again, it's not something completely new. This is what the costumes for the Snow Maiden were by Kuznetsov, yeah, so 20 years earlier, but it wasn't ballet, yeah, so there's a big difference to have something like that for opera and have something like that for ballet. So, and they are quite colorful when you look at them closely, and they have patterns which represent various pagan things. There's apparently a crossbone pattern, yeah, and also circles, which of course represent the sun, because it's all about the sun in transition to spring. So then the choreography, yeah, the ballet was lost, yeah, precisely because it failed on the first performance, or maybe not just for that reason, as we'll find out. There wasn't a connecting line. Yeah. And it was resurrected only in the 80s. And of course, in the 80s, it was hugely difficult to reconstruct this choreography. It's an amazing job done with various sources, such as drawings that were made at the premiere by Valentin Gross, and backstage photos and memoirs. And there were some people who were still alive, yeah, and who were part of that production and so on. So all that information was put together to create this recreation, but it's still a recreation, reconstruction. It's not the real thing. Yeah, so it's still a lost ballet. So what has been preserved, as Lynn Garofalo, the great historian of ballet, says, is a set of ideas. Yeah, so primitivism, modernity, violence, rejection of the ballet aesthetics. Everything is the opposite of what it should be. Yeah, so you don't have your toes turned out, you have them turned in. Yeah, you have the posture which is not graceful but slumped. You have the stamping of feet rather than point work. Yeah, you have masculinization. All the ballet you usually have in classical ballets are females. Yeah, so now you have 24 men on stage as well, so half of them are men. And choreography that does not necessarily face the audience. Yeah, you notice that they're with their backs to you. Yeah, even rude. Yeah, because they're busy with their own stuff. They're busy with the ritual. They're not doing it for you. They're doing it for themselves. Yeah, and they're not expressing it for you either. So it's kind of a forbidding spectacle. Let's see this again. I wanted you to see this because I wanted you to notice how the circles, yeah, the different circles of groups of people are almost repeating, yeah, the set, yeah, these hillocks or clumps of vegetation in the set, yeah. So it's almost like the set is continued into choreography. So now the same passage that I played for music, yeah, look at the what these different groups of people are doing, because they will all be doing different things, and I think that's been proven that that's what happened in Nijinsky, some kind of counterpoint, yeah, between a counterpoint in the body, the different parts of the body doing different rhythms, yeah. You will see this group in hats, yeah, they're going to be sort of bobbing up and down and doing these things with the arms on the accents, on the accented notes. Yeah, at the same time, also counterpoint between the groups when they will be moving at different rates and so on. So this is something very, very complex that they had to learn. They had 130 rehearsals to learn this, yeah, and with this difficult music. So it was quite an undertaking. So let's just see it again. Yeah, and yet you see the principle of visualization is still there, yeah, because she's jumping precisely on those screaming chords. Yeah, this is the old woman who is going to fortune tell. Yeah, so the choreography, again, summarizing a little here. Yeah, so conventional balletic movements replaced with naturalistic yet stylized movement. For example, there are moments when the chosen one, the sacrificial version, is shaking with fear. Yeah, so you can see that she is shaking, but it's already a stylized movement which becomes part of the language. Virtuosity is of the new kind, yeah, which is more reliant on precision, rhythmic complexity. Stamina is still present, but it's not the stamina of doing 32 rotations, yeah, it's now 123 jumps. Counterpoint I already mentioned, asymmetrical placement of these groups, yeah, there's no symmetry. And the movement itself was influenced, and a lot of people talk about it, by Dalcroze's eurythmics method. And this is Émile Jacques Dalcroze, who was a musician, and he invented this method of teaching musicians to move to music, and in a very particular way, so that various parts of their body would be imitating rhythmic values of various parts of the music. Yeah, so it's actually, you know, develops coordination, it develops ear, it develops more sort of inner understanding of the music. And it became a hugely popular, fashionable system. He had his own school near Dresden, and Diaghilev and Nijinsky actually went there, and the dancers took some classes with Dalcroze, trying to find a new school for this new modern type of dance. But then, of course, everyone started accusing Nijinsky that he was just stealing Dalcroze's method, and it was all very mechanical and so on. The finale, the great finale, is where this 123 jumps happen, is the moment where the chosen one dances herself to death. And again, you can see it, the way it's described, it's been described in various ways, both as something impersonal, that she becomes almost like a machine, part of a machine. She loses her mind, she belongs to the collective, yeah, she is completely, becomes part of this ritual. She loses her humanity in a sense. And therefore, we're also not empathetic towards her, yeah, we don't care, yeah. So again, the idea of the snow maiden, but without the romanticism. And yet in some of the reviews it's described as having a tragic power, tragic expressive power, and actually being very moving. Yeah, so I think it very much depends on how it's danced, who is dancing it, you know, what you've had for lunch and so on. It's very individual. So he doesn't give you any romantic postlude, yeah, so that you could shed your tears for her. Absolutely nothing. That's it. That's the curtain. So it's interesting that while they collaborated, they were thinking about each other's art. And Stravinsky, for example, was actually adamant that he wanted different choreography than Fokин's. Yeah, he said that Fokin appeared to be extraordinarily progressive at the beginning of his career, but new forms must be created now. Yeah, and the evil, gifted, and greedy Fokin had not even dreamt of these. Yeah. So he actually wanted his music to be expressed in this very new style. So I already mentioned some of these things, yeah, that the correspondences between different arts that are kind of direct, that are not happening through the narrative, but parallelisms that they found. And of course the choreography was very closely based on the music, as I've already shown you. And Nijinsky was actually, and he understood music well, he could play the piano, and he made sure that he memorized every section before he choreographed it. Yeah? So that was a huge amount of work as well, for the rehearsal pianist as well, who played it for him. So we're moving on to this infamous premiere and reception. And here I must say that the riot is partially always exaggerated, and it's a myth. And there are some things that will make you realize to what extent it is a myth. Yeah, so the premiere was not the first performance. The first performance was the dress rehearsal to which the critics were invited. So they already knew what was going to happen, and it passed without incident. Yeah, the premiere was taking place on a grand gala night where all the brilliant, glamorous audience of Paris came together. It was a new theater. The manager, Astruc, wanted particularly this piece for his theater. He then regretted this decision because it made him bankrupt. But nevertheless, there were curtain calls, yeah, so after all this noise and fights breaking out in the audience, apparently, never mind, there were curtain calls, several curtain calls. There was booing, but there was also applause. And the whole run of performances happened as it was planned, yeah, so 5 performances in Paris and I think 3 or 4 in London. Everything went as planned. The most amazing thing is that after the Rite of Spring, there was another ballet on the night. Yeah, it was Spectres de la Rose, and maybe somebody will correct me, but I presume that Nijinsky danced in that. Yeah, so he just imagined this situation. Yeah, so actually it wasn't as sort of horrifyingly scandalous. I mean, it was a bitter blow to them, but nevertheless, you have to keep it in proportion. So the ballet was actually dropped from the repertoire only after Nijinsky got married, and Diaghilev could not take this. You know, he immediately ejected him, which of course was a huge loss for the company. But the ballet could not be performed with his choreography, and Stravinsky was actually quite annoyed at that. Yes, because he thought, well, now there is no life for my ballet. But then it became popular as a concert piece, and in 1920, Diaghilev actually brought it back with a different choreography by Massim. But this is what I'm saying. Had this not happened, had Nijinsky not fallen in love with a woman and abandoned his lover, it's possible that they would have brought it again next year, yeah, and then it would have been different, and then it would not have become so famous. Yeah, so sometimes a failure like that is what makes this mythical work, yeah, which becomes a kind of fetish. So we have to, as historians, we have to, yeah, always spoil this story slightly. But anyway, so that a few comments. Stravinsky's music, written with uncommon verve and virtuosity, was purposefully and deliberately intended to be the most cruel for the ear that we had ever had the chance or had been inflicted upon us to hear. The wrong note is its most basic material, with the most crude, raucous, and unsociable timbres. This music is sometimes genuinely ugly. I mean, it seems so to us as people living in the year 1913. So that's an interesting point of distance, that it might not be ugly to people in 2019. The choreography was also described as cubist, monotonous, pretentious, and significant. It was suggested that the ballet mocked the public. And then somebody else saying, almost every quality of beauty or dramatic interest which we had grown to expect in the ballet was absent from this one. Although it was not a destruction of what had been valued in the past, but a gradual evolution towards a new expressiveness and a new technique. So we thought this was going to be a negative criticism, and actually becomes a positive one. The next section, the next chapter, I wanted to entitle with, again, I'll just play you a little bit of that film, with that phrase from that film.
You're taking the piss, Diaghilev!
Yeah, if you didn't get it, I'll play it again.
You're taking the piss, Diaghilev!
I think it's a very important point, because with modern art, you sometimes do wonder, don't you? This is the beginning. You wonder whether this is not a joke, whether somebody is not mocking the audience. And it is still the case that you would sometimes go into a gallery and say, oh, there's a banana taped to the wall, are you joking? Yeah, so you can either take it seriously and pay £100,000 for it, or you can actually go back to the joke and eat the banana, and then, anyway. So you can see how modern art constantly navigates this distance between what is a joke and what is not a joke. And I think at that point, the Rite of Spring was not a joke. They definitely thought seriously about it. They meant it seriously as this great progressive step. But the one that I'm going to bring in next, might make you wonder about, indeed, whether Diaghilev was taking the proverbial. So this is a beautiful curtain for the ballet Parade, which was presented in 1917. It's a curtain by Picasso. You can see his various circus people there, and a winged horse, and it's something to do with art and theater, and something very gentle and romantic. But the curtain doesn't actually reflect what happens in the ballet. So these are all the collaborators, Cocteau, who dreamed it all up, Picasso, Stravinsky. The choreographer is Leonid Massin, who now replaced Nijinsky as the main dancer, choreographer, and also lover. And the composer is Roerich Satie, and the way I wanted to present him to you was through this absurdist film from 1924. So Satie was on the left. So he was jumping towards this gun. The only thing that happens in this film is that the gun gets fired and then they jump away. So okay. So and Parade has no narrative at all, apart from the three groups of circus artists try to attract an audience to an indoor performance. It's a prelude to a show that we do not see because the public never goes in. All we have is the parade of these artists. So Picasso did the costumes. You can see this is a step forward again, yet again, from Roerich's costumes. Now the costumes are truly cubist. And this is the costume of the Chinese conjurer, which is very beautiful, but how do you dance in this? So I have little snatches from a film which was done when this ballet was reconstructed. So you will hear voice as well, but look at the dancing.
Wonderful cubistic costumes that Picasso designed, which are over 10 feet tall. And eventually we got Massin to America, And we tried very hard, with the help of many people, to pull the ballet back as close as one can.
And that too would...
Yeah, so that's Massin, whom they invited to reconstruct his own choreography. This is another bit. So it's about three managers. Yeah, there's the French manager, the American manager. They're both wearing these Cubist Cubist costumes, and the third manager is a horse. Yeah, so the horse, yeah, presented by two people. So it's the most jokey, slapstick humor possible. And this is how the Chinese conjurer dances.
He was a magician, so the images were things of being able to make fire come out of your mouth, grabbing it out of the air, and then making it come out, taking an egg, swallowing the egg,
and so on. Yeah, so you can get this is a very different type of dance, which is now very kind of acrobatic. It looks like circus or sport, like anything else, but also like popular dance. And this is the American girl. Oh, well, first we have the horse. And then I'll move it over. We don't need so much horse. And then the girl dances with the acrobats and the Chinese chorus. So that's the grand finale. Yeah. So you can see that it's a kind of sarcastic commentary on the art world, yeah, where the public doesn't want to go in, doesn't want to hear, doesn't want to know. You can see the costumes really severely restrict movement. Satie's music is influenced by these popular styles such as ragtime. The score includes a foghorn and a typewriter. And it's constructed very simply, even simpler than the Rite of Spring, yeah, from these blocks and from this very banal musical material. One more lost ballet is Prokofiev's first ballet for Diaghilev, which is called Chout. Yeah, Chout is just a French word for the buffoon. And the story is about the buffoon who outwitted the 7 buffoons. We are now already after the war. It's 1921 in Paris, and it becomes Prokofiev's first success after escaping the revolutionary Russia, or post-revolutionary Russia. Not going to read out all of this. It's the most grotesque and absurd and violent story you can imagine, taken out of Russian folk tales. Yeah, so you've started reading it. Yeah, so first he pretends to whip his wife to death, and then brings her back to life with the same magic whip. The buffoons buy the whip, then whip their wives to death, but cannot revive them. Yeah, and so it goes on. Yeah, so it's the most ridiculous and grotesque story. What else do we know? Yeah, because the ballet is lost completely and it could not be reconstructed. The choreography is lost. It really is now the Russian folk topic that we've seen developing in various ways, from exoticism into this modernist ritual, is now debased. Yeah. It's a ballet driven by design, because Mikhail Larionov, who created the costumes, which you're going to see in a moment, also acts as a choreographer. So somehow dance even taking the back seat. The costumes are once again unsuited for dancing, and the music develops the grotesque style pioneered by Stravinsky. So these are the costumes, incredibly colorful and cubist, Larionov was again a great artist. You might know of the Russian avant-garde. But how do you dance in these things? And unsurprisingly, the only video I can show you has nothing to do with the choreography of the original, although they're trying to get the costumes, the idea of the costumes sort of in there. But you'll hear a little bit of the music, so which is just a little snatch. And finally, another consequence of the Rite, connected to it in an interesting way, the Bolshevik ballet. The Bolshevik ballet is called Le Pas d'Acier. It's a French title which has several different renditions into English, but Prokofiev's favorite one is by Prokofiev again, and it was called Steps of Steel. So again, this is Diaghilev's absolutely crazy idea in about 1925 to repackage Russian exoticism. He just got visually fed up with all those ornaments, these folksy ornaments. He wanted something new for the eyes. And at that point in the Soviet Union, you had this very remarkable trend of constructivism, developed with all the, in theater there were all these ladders, there were all these geometrical patterns and so on, black and white and great contrasts of primary colors. So this is another ballet which was originally driven by design. So Diaghilev actually finds a Soviet constructivist, Georgy Yakulov, and brings him to Paris to participate in working out with Prokofiev this Bolshevik ballet. This is him. Unfortunately, today completely forgotten. I regularly pass a grave of his in Moscow, which seems to be completely left to just deteriorate. The inspiration for this ballet was this new aesthetic of the factory and communist labor, this harmonious labor in the factory where everyone is a wheel and a cog, in one great machine. And that was aesthetically a new thing and something very exciting. You can see that these are the main couple. At the beginning of the ballet, they are still a bit decadent because the first post-revolutionary years, there was a lot of chaos there, all kinds of seedy characters appearing on stage. But then they become workers. They have a huge hammer and very nice aprons, and they become new people for the new society. So actually it was a very provocative thing to do, because you can imagine that Russian emigres in Paris who fled the revolution, would not take lightly to this kind of thing, to this glorification of Bolshevism, which is what it was seen as. And Prokofiev was very perplexed by this, because he didn't want to lose his emigre audience, and he didn't also lose the potential invitation to go back to Russia. To Soviet Russia. We probably know that he eventually did move back to the Soviet Union. So he thought, oh, I'm going to write a politically neutral ballet. How do you do that with a topic like this? So I've described this all of you, to all of you already. And Prokofiev's music creates a kind of counterpart to this artistic constructivism. And an interesting way how it does this, it takes the ideas, the musical ideas of construction, of how music is constructed from the Rite of Spring. So it's again these patterns which are very obstinately repeated. We call them ostinato patterns. And superimposed. Only this time it doesn't represent the primitivist tribes, but it represents the modern factory and all the machines working and sort of grinding against each other. And interestingly, the Rite of Spring from the very start, from very early on, was heard as a kind of industrial portrayal of this urban industrialism. This is amazing, yeah, that it was not about that at all. But in the music, people felt that it was mirroring the world that they were living in. Yeah, this rather terrifying world of machines. You know, the 1920s, there were a lot of dystopian novels about how machines are taking over the world. Yeah, and well, we exactly at the same point now, yeah, where artificial intelligence is going to consume us all soon. So this is what T.S. Eliot said about the Rite of Spring. The scream of the motor horn, the rattle of machinery, the grind of the wheels, the beating of iron and steel, the roar of the underground railway, and other barbaric noises of modern life. Yeah, this is what he heard. And I'm going to show you a little bit from a reconstruction. It's a university reconstruction, so it's not a very professional recording, but it's great to see this on stage of Yakulov's set and the kind of reconstruction of what the choreography might have been like for Le Pas d'Acier. Again, the rhythms, yeah, the patterns, the repetition, but only now they represent this industrial world. So finally, just a few conclusions, just to finish this off, is that what I was trying to show is that there are traces of the Rite all over Diaghilev's other products. Yeah, that the Rite didn't just go away. It wasn't taken by them as a failure, something that we are never going to try again. On the contrary, they tried even worse. They pushed the boat out even further. Yeah, so Diaghilev never abandoned this idea of being cutting edge and avant-garde. And various particular things, yeah, that they remembered and reused several times was this aesthetic of ugliness in music, design, choreography, this anti-balletic approach, yeah, up to the point you ask your designer to put the dancers on. Yeah? How much more anti-ballet can you be? Yeah, the avoidance of narrative, this impersonality, yeah, that precludes empathy, very important modernist feature that was discovered in the Rite of Spring, is present in lots of other ballets. And the scandal itself, yeah, because Parade, of course, was trying to rival the Rite at the Rite. Yeah, they were trying to outdo it, and they didn't manage it. Yeah, so the scandal itself, as the motor of promotion, yeah, was used again by the Diaghilev enterprise again. And of course, just the final point is that the choreography that Nijinsky discovered there, such a brief moment of him being a choreographer, basically was the beginning of what we call the modern dance. Yeah, every time you go to a modern dance production, the Rite is there. This is the first time this was done. The movement that was expressive rather than based on any kind of balletic convention. And the music gave rise to the whole trend of this machine music, yeah, that was used not by just Prokofiev, or Honegger wrote a piece about a steam engine, which is called Pacific 231. Pacific 231 is just the name of the steam engine. Yeah, so music about machines, but also more broadly, of course, the Rite of Spring is everywhere, including minimalism, including rock music, almost everywhere. So the influence of both the ballet and the music have been absolutely huge. Thank you very much.